So for our next segment, we're talking about one of our favorite topics, Democrats. So Democrats have had a lot of problems, mainly evidenced by the fact that we got our asses handed to us in November. A lot of people have been focused on Democratic messaging, right? You've heard claims like Democrats just aren't reaching Black and Latino voters. You've heard claims like Democrats aren't speaking to young men, or things like the Democrats are not equipped to reach people in a digital age, or things like despite Biden's record, people just aren't aware of the improvements that he's made that are affecting their lives, right? And then other people, as we are often likely to do, focus more on policy, right? The Democrats aren't getting credit or the attention they deserve because they're just not delivering for people, right?
Yeah.
Or like healthcare for all isn't even part of the conversation, or things like we're facing, an inflation crisis, a housing affordability crisis, a homelessness crisis, a healthcare affordability crisis, and Democrats are the adults in the room, and they're just not able to deliver on these things. And then the last kind of angle to this thing that we hear a lot, and I'm sure you've heard if you've spoken to like any independents or moderates, is a slightly different take, which is like the Democrats promise all kinds of good stuff, but they never do any of it. And so government in general, or at least under Democrats, is ineffective. So we might as well go for the people who are going to cut our taxes.
Yeah.
And overall, I think these are all kind of different angles to a similar problem. But like the diagnosis is like, what is it? Like, are we out of touch? Are we focused on the wrong things? Are we just ineffective messengers? And like one thing I'm worried about is that a lot of people are focused on the messaging angle, which I think is important.
Yeah.
But like as part of like the election for the Democratic Party chair, one of the main hotly debated things that they were like debating, aside of course from fundraising, was like how they were going to reach like voters in the digital age, which presumes that we're doing everything right from a policy perspective. And I think that presumption is dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, look, we do need to give Biden credit where credit is due on certain things. All right?
Sure.
We need to give Biden credit for the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a historic investment in green energy. Mm-hmm. We need to give Biden credit for the PACT Act, which guaranteed health care to soldiers who were victims of toxic burn pits. Mm-hmm. We need to give Biden credit for the CHIPS Act, which was a historic investment in computer chips, many of which are used for electric vehicles nowadays that are necessary for the future. We also need to give him credit for the fact that under him, the NLRB actually, for the first time, expanded labor union ownership, and actually fought for workers' rights, actually did a pretty good job of fighting for workers' rights. We have to give the Biden administration credit for things like how under him, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau made it so that credit cards cannot fuck with your credit score because of medical debt. All right. There's a lot of good stuff that Biden did do. And to some extent, one of the issues that I think Harris had when she was running was that there were some good things that Biden did, and there were some good policies that she had economically. However, she really didn't spend as much time focusing on them and spent much more time focusing on, the message of Donald Trump being a threat to democracy, which he was.
Yeah.
He very much is.
Sure. But it put Democrats in the position of being the defender of the status quo in institutions.
Exactly.
Which people, generally speaking, don't think work anyway. So telling people how you're going to make it work for them is way more powerful and important than telling people how you're going to preserve the thing that doesn't work for them.
Exactly. And not to mention, then kind of shifting the area into some policy failures of the Biden administration that we just need to address. Number one, on foreign policy, there was a massive amount of young voters and Arab Americans, specifically in the states of Wisconsin, in the states of Michigan, and there was actually a surprising number in the state of Arizona that actually cited as their primary reason for for not voting for Harris, meaning either they stayed home or they voted third party, the war in Gaza. And the fact that Harris basically said, like, oh, I'm going to be exactly like Biden, and directly said that, the idea of a weapons embargo was off the table, like, that is a policy failure of the Biden administration that she was continuing to carry. Also, one of the biggest issues that is at the top of American minds is healthcare.
Yeah.
All right. And we saw in 2020 that basically a majority of the debate in the Democratic primary surrounded healthcare. All right. Yeah. Biden spent so much time talking about how star-spangled awesome a public option would be, in the attempts to shit all over Medicare for all. And yet, when he actually got elected to office with control of the House and the Senate, he didn't even try to go for a public option.
Yeah.
He stopped talking about a public option. He stopped talking about any healthcare reform. The only healthcare reform that happened was as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Medicare was able to negotiate drug prices for 10 drugs.
Yeah.
And that
huge progress relative to no drugs, but
yeah, but there's still a lot of drugs that we can't. And and Jon Stewart actually did a segment this week where he basically pointed out those drugs, and this is something we've talked about too. Those fucking drugs are subsidized by us.
Yeah.
Remember when we did our segment where we talked about the pharmaceutical industry, how basically we, as taxpayers, we usually we provide the funding for the early stages of drugs to figure out if they're worth the risk. And once a drug is shown promise, that is when these pharmaceutical industry companies swoop in, buy the patents, finish the research, and then development, because the risk is basically the risk has been mitigated at this point. It's a sound investment, and then they jack the prices up on drugs that we fucking subsidized in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. 10 is better than none, but come the fuck on, bro.
Totally. I totally agree with you. And Democrats will say, we'll point to all of the progress that you pointed out and celebrate it as if it is a celebration of the destination.
Yeah.
As opposed to celebrating it like, hey, we've done these things for you. You deserve more, right? We owe you more and better things. And I think you can only, despite the fact that those, to your point, are good. 10 is better. 10 drugs is better than no drugs, but not good enough. And I think we know that. I think the people that are interested in these things, which is the majority of people, like healthcare, a right to universal healthcare polls very highly, right? People want these things, but I think people recognize that it's not good enough. Right? Reducing inflation is great, but my costs are still too high and my wages are not keeping up with it. It's just not good enough to celebrate and say you're just going to do the same thing. And so I think that's where Democrats start to come, and especially the switching, Biden moving away from a public option, which he thought was the best thing as soon as he got into office, or even on immigration, right? First and foremost, Democrats should make the argument for immigration, the affirmative argument for immigration, but also retreating to the conservative position on immigration only when it seems politically expedient is exactly what people hate about Democrats, right? Because and makes them think that they are just another politician. Because I think that's it. I don't think you can actually message your way out of tiny incremental improvements that people deserve way more from. And I don't think you can message your way out of actually only responding to the political expediency of the moment. So I don't think it's just we need the right message. I think we need the right lawmakers.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because like ultimately it's really hard to get past someone like Kirsten Sinema, right?
Yeah.
Who's like, obviously, not in there anymore, but like at the time was like giving unapologetic, favors to pharmaceutical companies, right?
Yeah.
Or like, voting against closing the carried interest loophole, like essentially directly as a result of hedge fund funding.
Yeah.
For like to her, and or like
Yeah.
the fact that members of Congress, I think this is a point you make all the time, Nathan, can own individual stocks and so are doing insider trading and are benefiting from the results of their own votes. And so like, I just don't think there's actually getting past the corrupting influence of that position if you don't have the right kind of people in the job.
And let's also acknowledge that the initial fight that the Biden administration was trying to do in terms of like, going back to the pharmaceutical example, the initial fight was the negotiation of all drug prices for Medicare.
Yeah.
And they negotiated down from that because of Kirsten Sinema, because she got bribed by a bunch of pharmaceutical companies. They negotiated down from that to 10 drugs.
Yeah.
Honestly, a valid argument could be made to just fucking nationalize pharmaceuticals because we're already paying for the risks at the back end. Now, as we talked about in that other segment, the private sector does spend more money on the research and development of drugs, but it's important to note that we're the ones that actually do the risky investments. All right. So what I'm saying, I'm not saying that that's necessarily what we should do. I'm saying that's where we should start the negotiation at.
Yeah,
like that is basically where we should start the negotiation at. And the thing is, the Democratic approach to this last election, for too many of them, has just been basically, as we were kind of talking about in the last segment, has been basically appeasement.
Yeah.
In a closed door discussion among Democrats, Representative Tom Suozzi, who represents a Trump district in Long Island, said, quote, "The natural inclination is to fight, 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 fight. That's what got us to this point."
Yeah.
How fucking out of touch do you have to be to believe that? How
know.
fucking out of touch do you have to be to believe that? Here's the thing that Democrats need to understand, all right? Tweaks around the edges of a system that people view as inherently corrupt, on a system that people view as part of the problem,
Yeah.
Tweaks of institutions, or even just the straight up arguments of preserving institutions that people feel are just not working for them,
Yeah.
is not going to fucking work.
Yeah.
Right now in America, the bottom 50% of Americans own just 2.4% of the entire nation's wealth. The bottom 50% own 2.4% of the nation's wealth. The top 0.1% own approximately the same amount of wealth as the bottom 90%. Approximately 50% of Americans in the last year alone cited the cost of healthcare as a reason for going without healthcare. Like the cost of healthcare prevented them from seeking healthcare. All right? Yeah, medical debt is the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States. All right? These are systems that are inherently corrupt. Our system of taxation is inherently corrupt. The top 25 Americans in terms of wealth, all right? Their effective tax rate is about 4%. Meanwhile, what percentage of your paycheck did you have to pay? Did you have to pay in terms of taxation last year? All right, on average, the average working class American, it's about 25%. All right, it's around 25%,
And that's like income tax and stuff, right? Or does that also include like sales tax?
That's effective tax. That's the effective tax. All right, that's the effective tax of the average American is approximately 25%, whereas the effective tax of the top 25 richest people in America is about 4%. that is an inherently corrupt system.
Yeah.
All right. The fact that those people have an excess amount of control over politicians in the form of super PAC donations.
Yeah.
Even if Americans don't understand what Citizens United is, even if they don't understand how super PACs work, it doesn't matter what party you're in. It doesn't matter what your political ideology is in.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that if you are rich, you have more political influence because that is how our system works.
Yeah.
All right. The Democrats need to critique the system itself. All right.
Yeah.
They need to spend all of their time railing against corruption in Congress in terms of, as Michael pointed out, stocks, corruption in terms of super PACs, corruption in terms of dark money, and just money in politics in general. They need to rail against the current system of healthcare that is basically just it's a mafia.
Yeah.
All right. Health insurance is basically just a mafia middleman that their only job is to get between you and your doctor. All right. And somehow Republicans and conservative Democrats have been able to make the argument that, we want to preserve health insurance because of choice. You know what would actually give you choice? Is if we got rid of the whole concept of out of network. How many times have you had to choose a doctor, not because you wanted to choose that doctor, but because they were in network for your health insurance? What if there was just one network? So you wouldn't have to do that. You would have more choice under a single payer Medicare for all system. And yet these bullshitters, these shysters, these charlatans try to convince you that a single-payer healthcare system, which has been implemented successfully in 17 other countries around the world, they try to convince you that that would reduce your choice. We need a Democratic Party that is boldly standing up for these values, that is boldly standing against the corrupt system.
Yeah.
And the question is, who is it? Who is the leader of the Democratic Party right now? Who is actually standing up to Trump? Because there sure as hell is a lot of appetite for standing up to Trump. All right. Yeah. There were protests in all 50 states on President's Day. There were hundreds of thousands of Americans that came out and protested Donald Trump. There were protesters in front of the Treasury when Doge was trying to was taking them over. There were massive protests regarding immigration. Against the immigration policy in Los Angeles. There is a hunger for a resistance. Fucking seize the moment.
Totally. Yeah. It's remarkable to me that one of the things that I was listening to some interviews for the Democratic Party chair with the people that were running for it, and they all got asked similar questions about money in politics, right? And none of them had an answer that was get money out of politics. It was all, we've got to pick the right super PACs. Mm. It was stunning.
Yeah.
It was stunning. And the thing is, to your point, Nathan, if people feel like the system isn't working for them, they will try to burn it down. And that's how people like Trump get into office. And that's how people that want to make things better and work within a system to improve it lose power, right?
And the thing is, and that's how vigilantes who shoot healthcare executives in the street suddenly become folk heroes overnight.
Totally. Exactly. And that's why it feels gratifying for people when they see people like Elon Musk do irreparable harm to our government, right? Because they think blowing it up might just be the only way to fix it, right? And the thing is, to your point, people feel like the system isn't working for them because it isn't. And we can't message our way out of that. We can't message our way into claiming that incremental appeasement measures are the goal, right? Because that is not the system working, right? And right now the systems are, or the incentives just aren't aligned to deliver for the American people, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. There is no incentive in government right now to deliver success for the American people. Right. And so, and deliver what the average American needs. And so ultimately there isn't a way out of this for the Democratic Party or even any Republican without changing the things that are corrupting the system. To your point, real penalties for people that are owning individual stocks or trading with exclusive information or or peddling their influence in a way that benefits themselves. Like a reversal of Citizens United and or like exclusive like public funding of elections. Right.
Yeah.
Real commitment to the Hatch Act and real consequences for violation, like real things, right, that are going to put a firewall and not even a firewall. A firewall is not actually going to be like a wall is not going to be effective, right? Because like it's not even a good metaphor. People just go around it or over it. They find loopholes, all that stuff. It's not about a firewall. It's about taking away the incentives to try to work for corrupting the system to begin with. And if we can remove those incentives from the system, there actually is a chance that public servants in the form of our representatives have a good reason to listen to us and provide the things that we all need. But it's got to start with the root of the problem. And unfortunately, there's no incentive to solve that thing either. I'm not sure how it happens. I'm not sure how we do it, honestly. But there's not like a way to get to a sufficient, like there'll be one-offs, right? Bernie Sanders or people that don't accept PAC money, like AOC, like there are politicians in the role, but they will always be cast as the fringe.
Yeah.
Right? As long as the majority of elected folks are doing it for personal gain and incentives because they have a vested interest in casting these people as the fringe and not putting them in positions of significant authority, not putting them front and center as messengers because it's too much of a threat to their personal interest in staying in their position, getting paid as much as they can.
And here's my roadmap for that. We can learn something from Trump. Because the thing you need to understand is that Trump has basically foregone most of his party to deliver messages straight to the people.
Yeah.
And he is so popular among the Republican Party, among Republican voters, that anytime people go against him, they suffer. Now, importantly, when it comes to going against Trump or not going against Trump, the focus is less on policy and more about just saying nice things about him or believing that the election was stolen or peripherally saying that you hate immigrants or whatever. Like that's what the focus is on. It's not about, fundamental policy. Like a lot of Trump's ardent supporters will say they believe one thing. We'll say they're anti-war and they love Trump because he's anti-war. But then we'll find ways to defend the fact that he wants to fucking start a war with Greenland and the Panama Canal and Mexico and Canada. Like it's less about policy. But we can still learn something from the fact that the establishment Republicans are terrified of Trump because they are terrified of Trump's base. And what we can learn from that is that leaders who actually focus on policy, leaders who are uncorrupted, who don't take PAC money, leaders who are actual fighters, they need to be propped up more and more to the point where they become so popular and their policies become so popular that the rest of the Democratic Party is afraid of them, all right? That they are bullied into submission. Because that's what needs to happen. The rest of the Democratic Party basically just needs to be bullied into submission to support actually changing the system. Because otherwise, they're not going to. They care about keeping their power. And in their minds, the way that they keep their power is by basically kowtowing to corporate interests because corporate interests have a stranglehold over them. But if we make it more of if we make sure that they know that they are punished even more if they go against and these important changes to the system, then they will have no choice but to go along with it. Now, right now, Bernie Sanders is actually going on this Fight Oligarchy tour. Where he's going around the country doing rallies, by the way, doing rallies that are fucking packed because there is a hunger for fighters right now. There is a hunger for fighters. And it's not just leftists or liberals. It's people that understand that the system is broken and they need to see somebody who is actually doing something about it. Now, look, Bernie Sanders is 83 years old. Like, it's kind of sad that he's the only one who's actually showing leadership within the Democratic Party right now. Because like, there's no reason why it should be left up to some dude who's 83 years old. I mean, Jesus Christ. If this dude ran for president, by the end of his first term, he'd be in his 90s. Like,
not realistic.
Probably not realistic. I mean, but they're, but we do need to pay attention to which leaders are actually going to be the biggest fighters right now. And right now, I'm seeing AOC, I'm seeing Ro Khanna. Those are the type of people we need to be propping up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But to be clear, when I say prop those people up to the extent that we support their policies, not to the extent that we support them as people. Like that we don't want to create a cult of personality. Like that's not what I'm advocating for. Prop them up to the extent that the policy, that as long as they are saying the right policies, that they're being supported, they are being that those policies are being elevated, and that the rest of the Democratic Party gets to the point where they're so afraid of their base, that they're as afraid of their base as the Republicans are of theirs, that they have no choice but to go along with these policies. And if you do that, you beat Trump. If you are able to prop up candidates to create a Democratic Party that people actually convinced are going to fight to change the system, to not just tweaks around the edges, but to fundamentally change the system that people view as broken, you will win. I'll say it again, like I said it before. Makey people life better, makey people want voting for you. Not makey people life better, not makey people want voting for you.